why can't AI just do that? And if the answer is it can, the question is, what happens to those lawyers? So we could start developing, and I think we are starting to develop AI judges. The ability for junior lawyers to consume all that content themselves, and they can accelerate their learning now, whereas before they'd be in some ways held back.
So what happens when AI, legal AI, is fighting legal AI to be
Yes.
judged and ruled upon by AI?
So this is fascinating for me because obviously with my legal platform, I'm looking at the next level, which is for the AI tool to negotiate.
Will lawyers still exist in 5 years?
Short answer.
This week we have Kim Simmonds. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with a very poignant question, and what this podcast will be about, and at the very least begin. Will lawyers still exist in 5 years?
Short answer. It'll be very different, and likely most of them will not exist. That's a short answer.
How about the long answer?
Yeah. Shall I tell you a bit about my background first?
Yeah, give some context and background. That'd be
Just
great.
about,
Yeah.
So I run 2 businesses. I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been a lawyer for 20 years. And I run a law firm, which deals with tech businesses. So we're a very specialized law firm. And about 3 years, so that's been going for about 11 years. But 3 years ago, I saw that automation needed to happen in what we were doing. Actually, this is probably more than 3 years. It was probably about 4.5, 5 years, because it was before LLMs were a thing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story around this before, as part of the introduction, because I think it's very important to understand my way of thinking before I really kind of get into the long answer. But through my journey as a lawyer, I realized that the market really needed instant answers, needed instant access to legal, needed, more cost-effective ways of getting legal advice. And unless you went to a lawyer, you were kind of stuck either recycling things that you used in previous companies or did an internet search or something, right? And I thought a lot of the work we're doing, we can automate. We can sort of put templates on, we can build templates. We can create questions that lawyers would typically ask a business. And then my mind went to, but hang on a second, how can we analyze documentation to understand what legal risk is in a documentation? And that started a whole journey of machine learning, because again, before LLMs. And I created a proof of concept, which started with an NDA. And I got some data scientists together and I said, right, this is how my brain works as a lawyer to look at this NDA. Then I'm downloading everything to you. Find a way to analyze it. And we successfully did a proof of concept, which went on to getting Innovate grant money, which then launched Cloud Contracts 365, my second venture. And that's really a legal AI platform designed for tech businesses to go and create their contracts, review contracts from a legal risk and mitigation point of view, and then and manage the contracts. So e-signature, data room, renewal reminders, that sort of thing. So that's really kind of my background: lawyer, law firm, tech leader now, and obviously diving into the AI world very much as we speak. Why do I think lawyers will not exist? When I look I sort of really see myself more as a visionary than anything else, because I always look at what are the threats, what are the things that are going to kill my industry, going to kill my job, kill my businesses. And I saw it 5 years ago when automation should have been a thing, and it became a thing in my business. And now what am I thinking about AI? Well, what is AI? It's the ability to digest huge, vast amounts of content and give you an answer, essentially. How do lawyers work? How are they trained? We go to law school. we digest huge amounts of content, and through experience, we apply that content to the matter at hand and generate a response. And through that, we learn how to respond maybe better. We refine our responses as life goes by. And that's what builds an experienced lawyer. So why can't AI just do that? And if the answer is it can, the question is, what happens to those lawyers? What happens to the legal industry?
There's another point to that as well, which is if we follow the thinking through and we looked at, as you said, the time probably not long after the pandemic, there was a bit of obviously a huge change everywhere with people moving from working in offices to remotely. And it was a concern, again, prior to the advent of AI as we know it today, that what happens with junior lawyers and those people in any particular sector, but let's be very specific about law. How do they learn? How do they interact with people? How do they validate their thinking? How do they see the edge cases? How do they interact with clients? Because clients are, I'm one myself of law firms. I understand what I'm trying to say, and the job of a lawyer is also to understand what it means, and in the context of frameworks. Has it been long enough now where that knowledge aggregation through the training process had gone anyway? So actually it's possible to do something now which it wasn't perhaps prior to 5 years ago.
100%. And it's interesting because I had to lead my law firm through COVID. And although we were set up anyway for remote working, I had juniors in the team who all of a sudden they felt sort of cut off from listening in on conversations that the partners were having with their clients or sitting in on negotiations. It's a slightly different thing when you have to bring someone in on a call. Someone could be sitting in the background listening in and what have you, in the traditional sense of, how we used to do our calls and stuff in the office. So it's an interesting process by which, before AI came about, it felt like there was that learning gap. I mean, we had to solve that problem anyway, and we solved it through really good learning, lunch and learns and things like that we did in the team to keep bringing up the learning and the knowledge base of these junior lawyers. But now there's the ability for junior lawyers to consume all that content themselves, and they can accelerate their learning now, whereas before they'd be in some ways held back, because it was only if the partner had the opportunity that they could sit in on that opportunity and listen and learn. But now, if you have a really ambitious junior lawyer who actually wants to accelerate their career path, there's nothing stopping that person, because they can go to AI tools, and we'll talk about which AI tools and how they should be using them. But certainly they can go and consume that content. But there are guardrails around that, because how they're learning needs to be, and this is quite critical, I guess, for how AI is going to take over, but how they're consuming that AI at the moment, it's hit or miss, because AI is not 100% accurate. So, and I don't know, I digress a little bit, forgive me, but I need to tell you the story. So in one of the states in America, I can't remember, I think it's Colorado, there were a team of lawyers that used AI to build a case, right? And there was the judge there, and they were defending the case, I think it was. And basically, the AI completely gave them false case law. And they presented rather than checking whether this is accurate or not, they presented that to the judge. The judge knew it was a fake case and debarred the whole team, because he said, quite rightly, you are in a profession where this is your job. People rely on you to get this right. And you came to me with completely fake cases because AI told you that this was the case.
I mean, that's systematic of so many problems across business in general.
Yeah.
But where there's an element of trust, I mean, you could look at this and say equally in medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, it really highlights the human aspect of what is the role and the responsibility, given we're talking legal, what is the role and responsibility of legal professionals in interacting with work in any particular form. It does change the dynamics, because where it wasn't done by AI before, now it could be. I'm going to bounce around a little crazy as well. Generalized AI. If everything is generalized, and we can look in simple terms, generalization such as all people in a certain area are like that. All people in another area, all people from this country or that country.
Yeah.
We live our lives constantly fed with generalizations based upon somebody's motivation, right? It's a nature of selling as well. And you could even be talking shoes. If you wear those shoes, you're going to be like in the cool crowd, and it's going to make you feel more you can list it down.
Exactly.
Everything is selling that way. So the human choice to have that critical thinking, to look at it and say, right, we do have more ability. How does that responsibility translate into something very actionable? And I suppose there's an education from the customer standpoint, people employing lawyers or legal services, and the responsibility from the legal side to say, well, what is it where we need to be able to achieve, and what do we expect from technology?
And also, when you look at that question, the answers will change with the times, because where we are today, there is definitely more of an emphasis on the lawyers checking. There's still very much a need for lawyers right now. Don't get me wrong. Right now, the AI is too immature to kind of cope with what it kind of needs to do to fully replace lawyers. So now we need that checks and balance. We need that ability for lawyers who are assessing what's coming out of the AI tools, whatever you're using, and help the user of that understand whether that's hallucinating or if it's accurate. My concern is maybe not even a concern. I guess my thought process around where AI is going to be in 5 years' time is that critical thinking is going to outweigh the critical thinking of any human being, because it's going to be fed throughout the years the way that we critically think now. And so it's going to start learning, and it's going to be able to learn across so much more than one human or group of humans can actually do. So where lawyers will be in 5 years' time, where they're going to support that, I think is going to be more around, we talked about this earlier, but social values around how the AI is going to be generating the responses. So how it's gathering the content, the data, who is governing its ability to not discriminate, to not have bias, to not produce a result that's going to harm an individual. That's where and that's where the lawyers are really going to come into play. But you don't need hundreds of thousands of lawyers for that.
It'll probably make lawyers much more optimal. So instead of the billable hours, it will be the value created for the customers.
The billable hours, I know, such a thing of the past, really, even in that sense of how the legal industry is trying to shift away.
But it's also quite complicated. I mean, look, marketing is very similar, ad agencies, and I remember it used to be maybe there still is, the ratings based on billable jobs, and you're the best based upon how much you charge, when it should be what the outcomes are. So let's look at it from a very positive standpoint then. If we were to look at the potential of AI within the legal sector in the future, could drive human-led, ethically considered better outcomes. Another thing which I think would be interesting to explore, the law and legal cases, the relationship between the two. And I know you've got a fascinating point around the nature of the law, how the law is structured. And I don't actually think many people know how the law works.
Yeah.
Because that has a massive impact on how you address things from a legal circumstance perspective.
Yeah, so in England we have what we call a common law system, which is based on our ability to look at cases, but also have creative thought around whether that case law is still relevant today. So we can evolve law as we speak because it's not necessarily coded like it is in France, for example, where they have what we call a civil code system. A civil code is very much black and white. These are the codes. This is how you govern the business and the rules based. Whereas we are very much on a case based, like how do we want to adapt or change the way we interpret the law, maybe to best suit our circumstances. Obviously, that's what the lawyer's job is, right? So what's really interesting about that is that it's very creative. So it leads to creative thought. It leads to debate. It leads to challenging the status quo. But when you look at how we do that as lawyers, we fundamentally have to work with what we have at the time. So the current case law, we have to look at the situation at hand. And then we have to look at why does that particular law not fit in with the situation, and how can we interpret the law now to best suit the situation that we're defending or whatever it might be. Okay. So when you look at that, how are lawyers doing that? They've got the content, the case law. They've got the set of situations and circumstances. That's what the client is feeding to the lawyer. This is what's happened to me. It's not fair because X took this away from me, or blah, blah, blah. It's a set of situations. And then the lawyer is looking at all the various case laws and going, well, we could pull something from here. We could pull something from here. We could do this here. And altogether, we could try to change the law to say that this situation is unenforceable or it's enforceable.
Is that the term a precedent set?
A precedent set, exactly. But all of this is just content. It's downloads, right? It's downloading from what they know. In actual fact, if you think about what AI can do, it's going to be able to do that far more accurately because it's going to have all the case law at hand rather than some of the case law that the lawyer might be familiar with, right? Because it's not a perfect art researching this stuff. And then the lawyer, the client is going to be able to feed to the AI tool what their set of circumstances are. And someone is going to train that AI tool, because hopefully you'll use one that's actually trained by lawyers, to then figure out, okay, I'm going to pull this, this, and this, and this in a more accurate way that's actually pulling from that data. This is how I think we could argue. Now, where does that go? That could go to AI judges. So we could start developing, and I think we are starting to develop AI judges. So that means, what does that mean what do you think that means for our amazing nation? What could that help with?
Well, if you can have something that's founded in trust, truth, that makes sense, can be validated, governed in the right manner. I mean, I'm aware we have issues where often there aren't enough judges or the time that it takes to do things. I mean, again, the rate limiting factor from a human perspective, and I'm very pro-humans, obviously I am one, we're all one, but I'm very realistic about the limitations. And the limitation across any particular sector and any particular thing, we can only read at a certain speed. Some of us can read a little bit faster, but could we read the equivalent of 30 encyclopedias in the next 30 seconds? Not in a way that we could comprehend it. So the context of a judge looking at all the evidence, looking at the cases and making sense of it, where we can trust there's a rationalization fitting within a framework, would probably be extremely beneficial.
Exactly. And you're right. You have to look at AI in two ways: the human element around the use of the AI and what the benefits of AI can actually do. For me as a lawyer, I feel very much that there's still a lot of injustice in this country. People are taking 2 years to get their cases seen. There is so much pressure on judges to deliver judgments. There's a lot of natural bias that happens in a human. Let's just be honest about
Yeah.
this. And with a common law system, that can be amplified. I was talking about this on the way here. I was saying how you could have a judge who doesn't even understand his or her own bias, doesn't even understand his or her upbringing that has created a discrimination in an unconscious way that has created the judgment that he or she has set. And when you look at that and you remove that element, but create social values around the use of AI, can you create a better justice system? Can you create a faster one? And then what does that lead on to? A lot of people were saying how, okay, the judgment's been made, there's an enforcement needed to reclaim whatever money there is, but I can't get that money. So what's the point of having the judgment? It might lead us to understanding, well, what's the next step here? How do we then elevate that justice system to create enforcement ability as well? And of course, it's a bit Minority Report when you look at all this, because then you can start to go down a very slippery road of saying, well, then can you start to think about someone's propensity to commit a crime or do something wrong? And will we get involved as a society at that point to prevent it for zero crime?
But there are many ethical issues. I mean, I'm aware of the post office scandal, which taught me a little bit about how the law interprets technology. And it was the Horizon system. And the law had no provision for understanding that an IT system could possibly be incorrect. So it looked like the case law had established the only legal position was that people must be criminals, despite of evidence being there to the contrary. But it was horrific circumstances because of a nuance. I think probably a lot more going on behind the scenes, relatively political and other reasons, lots of money involved. But fundamentally, the future of technology, or the future of artificial intelligence applied to the law, if we look at how the world has played out, I think over the last 60 years. Beyond that, it was relatively similar, but the advent of information being created with technologies, probably 40 years old. The advent of massive amounts of information and communication documented, 20 years. Extortionately huge amounts of information contextualized the last 10 years. So we're sitting on top of some mountains that have already been built, and the rate of acceleration. So even if we said 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the nature of how the world operates is not fundamentally and will not be the same as it was, nor has it been on 10-year increments. But if the laws that govern that and the approach to governing that entirely changed world, if that hasn't evolved, there has to be a break point somewhere.
But I think the way we evolve through the different cases, and that's why I was saying the guardrails have got to be there. Because if we are evolving and we're going down the wrong path, that could be very detrimental to a lot of people. And there does need to be someone monitoring how AI is fundamentally churning out the results, which in itself is kind of a flawed process.
Is that a new job then? Is it
I think
potentially
so.
a new part of how you take experience, how you evolve that experience, how you get good lawyers that think in the right way,
Exactly.
that are innovators? I mean, it's effectively what you're doing and you've been doing is observing the world and saying, why does it work this way? How can we innovate? How can we solve problems? which is a human thing, just put into the legal context. But that type of thinking is going to be critical.
It's so critical, but in its own right, it's also flawed. There, whatever way you look at it, there's always going to be a flaw in this. It's never going to be perfect art, because everyone comes at things, whether they realize it or not, with some form of discrimination or bias. Now, you formulate a group of lawyers, let's say, who's in charge of, or a body that's in charge of regulating the AI judge, or whatever it could be that materializes. You have to find people from all different types of ways of thinking to group their thinking together to properly analyze the results that are happening. Because there is so much of, as you say, critical thinking in this, someone who is aware of the ways to critically think about it, but who also understands the benefits of it. So it's harmonizing the AI tool. It's not sort of working against it. That is a new job. That is something that I feel that some of the lawyers who want to take part in this needs to start thinking, how do they do that from now? What is it skill set wise that they need to understand how to evolve that? And it may not even just be legal reasoning. That could be social reasoning. That could be, all those kinds of values.
Well, it's definitely considerations that we've all, as humans, been cognizant of in some way.
Yeah.
But now there's a very dramatic impact coming, which will have demonstrable consequences.
Yeah.
Positively or negatively.
Yeah.
And do you think this is going to be like this worldwide?
I can't see that far ahead, to be honest with you, because when you look at the world, there are so many different political agendas, different ways, different values. I mean, culturally different values, looking at religion and politics and social values and all of that all those sort of systems. How can you harmonize the world into one legal system? But it doesn't mean that you can't. I just can't rationalize that right now. I think there has to be a series of things that have to occur in life for us to even edge closer to that. And I think it's not going to rely on just the legal systems. It's going to rely on the political ways. And this is such a massive topic in its own right, to sort of go into the future and visualize the future and go, well, how do we get that one world approach with the legal system, but also with the political system, with the cultural systems?
Well, if we take a little hop from there, rational, logical, and we look at how individuals behave on the global stage. So let's say you have Instagram, and who do you follow? What countries are they in? Is that even a consideration? And if you're creating art, you're creating anything of intellectual property, your customer base is the world.
It's the world, I know. Exactly.
So in many ways, we're a good number of years, if not decades, into the global economy, where from a personal perspective, if you think about everything around us that we have, that we buy, whether it's the food that we eat or the watches we wear, where do they actually come from? What's the global supply chain? But where you are creating things, legally, our singular jurisdictional law,
it's so limiting.
It's only really covering a little proportion of the coverage, the footprint that we have, possibly digitally, if not physically, in the world.
I agree. And I think also my frustration as a lawyer is that you have so many different things to consider when the world is actually working a bit more as one. When you're looking at Instagram, or when you're looking at using AI tools even, you want to use these things, but you're restricted in a lot of ways because it depends where the data is being stored. If you're a business, you've got to figure that out. And you might think, oh, it's a UK product, but you don't know if the data is being stored in China. You don't know what third parties are using, what is kind of going on in the back end there. And in this day and age, we have obviously contracts with our consumers, our end customers. We have data protection laws that we have to think about. So there's a lot of complexity at the moment navigating the different legal systems when a product might be a worldwide product and the world wants to use that product. And I think it's a fascinating world because it lends itself to having that one world legal approach, but in reality,
it's a lot. It's simple, yet it's not in many
yeah.
ways. So how about if we look at the evolution of the very, very recent explosion of AI? So the very large companies and several across the world.
Yeah.
The people that have been working on that and their perspective of the world and what they think the world should have. And any technology, anything. We can imagine creating a new type of airliner. And we came up with it in January last year. What would prevent from an idea to taking an airliner to market where it's commercially flying millions of people?
Yeah.
Legally, legislatively, from an ethics standpoint, there are things that need to be undertaken to ensure a plane is airworthy. The impact that popular AI can and is having has the potential to have benefits of an equal size and risks of an equal size. What's your interpretation of how much thought and consideration has gone into what is now kind of everywhere, and how we should even be conscious and begin to think about what have we not really thought about, which if we returned we would definitely find it quite obvious that we haven't looked at things.
Just from a risk perspective, is that what you're sort of...
I think
Yeah.
definitely more from a risk perspective.
I mean, my biggest risk issue with... So I was saying to you earlier, 3 buckets. I've got 3 buckets of legal risk that I always look at. It's not to say this is just limited to 3 buckets, but these are 3 main buckets. You look at data protection, we'll talk about that in a second, intellectual property, and confidentiality. Because when you're using it, if you're the user uploading, you're going to be the one responsible for what you're doing there, right? When you strip all that back, the thing that I'm most concerned about as a lawyer is the personal identifiable data, the security risk with that. Because for me, AI, the way it works, if someone's uploaded my image without my consent using an AI product, because I think it's fun to do that, someone's uploaded my date of birth, I've got my password all over the place, they could probably hack into that, my address is somewhere, all of a sudden someone has the ability to get a really good picture of who I am, who my children might be, what my life story is. You know, I'm most concerned about identity theft and security around my bank accounts and my businesses and everything else, my mortgages, anything that I have asset-wise. That's what I'm really concerned about in this global world of AI. And those guardrails are so critical for anyone who is creating AI, because that is the social responsibility that everyone has when they're creating AI. But the user has got to be really conscious of that. And I always say, when I look at an image that's been uploaded and circulated on LinkedIn, my first thought, because I am a lawyer, my first thought is always, did they get consent to do that? That person's been tagged. Did they say that was okay? Because I bet you they didn't even think about getting consent. And what is that image going to do? Who else is going to use and recycle that image?
Well, training data. There's a reason some companies have been able to evolve their technology quicker than others. And we've really had a culture of a good period of time now of literally feeding, I'm sure it's in the small print somewhere, huge amounts of data, huge amounts of video and photography to a select handful of people. But knowing how transformers work, there's a pretty good chance that you may end up in some random person's video as an AI generated person because you're a big social media poster.
Yeah.
It's a bit worrying, really, isn't it?
It's super worrying. And I always say, read the terms and conditions. I know that's boring, but look at the intellectual property rights there. Who's got the license rights to that? Do you own your own image when you put it in? Do you know what's happening to that image? Who owns that? Where's that going? It's the same when you're uploading intellectual property of a client, and you think you're just generating a report to help them out. That's their moat. That's everything. That's their valuation and their business gone because you've taken something that they thought was protected through you. And yet, and I look at things from a business perspective all the time because that's my job, right? I work with businesses. So I'm always warning them, are you aware of the shadow AI that's going on in your business? Are you aware of even your own AI tools that you're using? Do you know where the guardrails are? Do you know what's happening? Because you cannot put your head in the sand anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge risk to using the very popular services.
Yes.
And understanding what's happening. I mean, I've described it on the podcast with a few guests, and many people are passionate about it from different perspectives, but passionate about the fact that do people understand when you prompt a system,
you're feeding it
comes back and says, oh, okay, here we are. No, that's not quite what I meant. And come back, no, I want more like that. It's first of all pulling out your knowledge. And how do you define knowledge? Then, of course, if you do just, I'll upload this document, can you analyze this for me? And as you say, is it confidential? You're just giving your business away.
Totally. 100%. And also, when you're using that report, whose intellectual property is it at that point?
Yeah. And also, if it's a report, I mean, obviously we deal with risk, resilience, security as well.
Yeah.
What happens when people are making recommendations? When the consequences, I mean, it's the whole point of risk. And if there's millions, tens of millions on the line, human life on the line, you go, oh, but the report says.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can't guarantee trust and truth, if you can't understand where the data's come from, if it can't be generated in a domain which is entirely secure and private, then there's a whole list of things. That's when I say like the plane analogy.
Yeah.
It's like people are taking off in planes and nobody thought, has it got any fuel in there? Does it have windows? Is there any oxygen in there? But people are blindly walking forward and doing things. And why? Because of convenience.
Yeah, I mean, it's the shortcut at the moment. And humans are inherently lazy. So they're going to find the shortcuts. And technology is why we build technology, because it is inherently a shortcut. Is it easier to chug everything into an AI tool and then get a report that would have taken you 3 days to do if you hadn't had that?
Until the point where the consequence, the value of getting it right outweighs the effort. I mean, we'll probably end up creating technology and AI to solve the gaps created by people trying to take shortcuts.
So we go back to the case that I told you about in Colorado, and that's a prime example. Someone used AI to generate a defense, which was completely unfounded. There was no such thing as those case laws. They were debarred. This is what's going to happen time and time again, is that people's professional careers are going to be on the line, individually and through companies as well. Because if you are relying on something that you do not have critical thinking about, and you do not have the expertise to understand whether that is right or wrong, you're checking the work, then ultimately what is going to happen to your career and to people's reliance on that profession?
So what happens when AI, legal AI, is fighting legal AI to be judged and ruled upon by AI?
So this is fascinating for me, because obviously with my legal platform, I'm looking at the next level, which is for the AI tool to negotiate. And it's a really interesting world that I'm going into, because as lawyers, we negotiate things based on our understanding and our experience, so our content and our experience. But it's all playbooks. It's all things that you can write down, and you can advocate. You play devil's advocate all the time as a lawyer, so you know what the other side's going to come back with, and you know how to prep your argument to go back to them. And it's like a dance, you kind of do that, and then you relinquish this particular point for this particular point, and this is how it works. So when you look at that level, AI can start to do that very, very quickly, which actually means that you might get to a more centered point. You might get to a more balanced point. And I think that's where the interesting legal AI can generate really good responses for people in a fair and balanced way.
So one thing I've noticed heavily over the years, as time has ticked on, and this was on the basis of asking some of the young staff to ring someone, and it was almost like I was asking them to have a nervous breakdown. And they would do anything. They'd find any excuse other than to pick the phone up and ring someone, which in interesting times gone by, it would be preferable to look someone in the eyes, the relationship, to trust the person, to know that they know what they're talking about, to engage, to have the relationship. And that's more how business was conducted. This evolution of let's just not do that. And if you look at AWS, you look at most services, they're low to no touch. You can't speak to a human at AWS, even if you spend a ton of money. It's now normal to effectively not deal with people. And if the generations evolving are changing, where does that leave lawyers from a human perspective and automation? Are you of the mind that lawyers won't be there?
I think that some will be there, but I think they're going to be there to train AI, and they're going to be there to safeguard and create guardrails. So they're not going to be used. And I can explain how lawyers are being used at the moment so people can relate to that. So, for example, I can give an example of how my lawyers are used in the commercial sense, right? And then I can show how I think AI is going to replace that journey. And then I can say, well, what is it then from standing now and in 3 to 5 years' time, as AI evolves, will that lawyer position themselves to do?
And do you think there'll be a human relationship, or like for example, yourself with the law firm?
Yeah.
I'm sure people will want to speak to you, even though the work you could get done by AI.
Yeah.
Do you think people still want the comfort and they value paying for the relationship?
I think the older generation will. I think the younger generation will be so used to automation, they won't. But I think also it's a bit like, those chatbots that you come across. I don't know if you go on a banking hotline and you're like waiting for someone and you get the automated. If you're, say your question now and I didn't quite understand you, and it never quite works. So it sort of depends. Like, technology is interesting because AI is super advanced, but everything else seems really super slow. And the adoption of that is ridiculously slow as well, in some weird way. Shadow AI adoption, huge, but actual adoption to bring it into business processes is really slow. So in some weird way, we've got like this super advanced technology and the super slow things. Like, why are you still talking to a chatbot for your banking line that still can't really understand what you're saying? Right? You're still waiting to get the human in that experience because it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated, and that's the issue. When an issue is super complicated, or it's a one-off, or it's a weird fringe case, will that AI, the question is, will that AI pick that up? And if not, who's going to be picking that up? And I think that's the interesting journey for the lawyer. And I'm just going to sort of almost finish on this bigger question, which is, what's going to happen to the human connection, to the human experience of business and businesses when AI does start to be the thing that everyone goes to and turns to as their first port of call. Will humans become the last resort? And therefore, where does that leave lawyers? Where does that leave anyone in that mix? And I think that's a really important question, no matter what industry you come from, to understand, because essentially you could be wiping out something that's really critical.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's a lot to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. It's exciting. For me, I see the opportunity and the excitement and all of the great things that AI can do from a legal standing. The justice, the access to justice, the fast speed of which we can get justice. That for me is, and the democratizing of legal. That's what I built the legal platform, to democratize legal, so it's not cost prohibitive. Businesses can get access to what they need in real time. But I don't build things just because I think it's a great idea, it's going to make a lot of money. I build it because I understand what problem I'm trying to fix and what does the solution really look like, but also how do you safeguard that to preserve the human connection in all of this. My law firm is still very much connected to my legal platform because there'll be things my platform can't do, that people do need that high level advisory work, and they go to my lawyers for that. So there is a place. And as we move across the years, there might be a shift of that place. There might be a change of that place, but that's part of evolution. And that's the journey that we're all on, whether we like it or not. It's embracing that change.
Well, I think everyone needs to really be a little visionary in some way, and some need to be big visionaries, and you're definitely into that category, watching what's happening, doing something about it, iterating and imagining the future and coming up with answers, coming up with ideas.
Yeah.
And not everything will work out completely predictably of everything we can imagine, but you've got to be able to imagine it first, put something together, try, experiment, and be positioned in the right place. So I think what you're doing is going to end up being extremely important to a huge amount of people.
Thank you.
Kim, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Graeme. Thank you.